Welcome to the Builder Marketing Podcast, your go-to source for home builder marketing excellence. Each week, we deliver inspiration, cutting-edge insights, and actionable strategies designed to help you stay sharp, reach today's buyers, and generate more sales-ready leads. Join us for real-world conversations with industry leaders who share proven ideas and tactics that actually work. And now, here are your hosts, Greg Bray and Kevin Weitzel.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Builder Marketing Podcast. I'm Greg Bray with Blue Tangerine.
And I'm Kevin Weitzel with Outhouse.
And we are pleased today to have joining us Nick Chitty. Nick is the VP of Sales at Conversion. Welcome back, Nick. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, gents. Lovely to be back.
All right. Well, for those people who still haven't had a chance to meet you, Nick, give us kind of that quick intro and background about yourself.
I'm Nick Chitty. I'm VP of Sales at Conversion. I've been working with the team over here for the last 5 years, specifically with our home builders. For those of you that don't know much about Conversion, we are a conversion rate optimization solution. Our aim is to convert more of our clients' high intent traffic into qualified inquiries for their OSCs and on-site sales team.
Some of you may have noticed that Nick talks funny. He talks funny because Conversion's out of the UK, correct?
We are indeed. So HQ is out of London. I head up the North American operation. So I'm an adopted statesman or compatriot to you guys, and I've loved working in this space specifically, and of course being on the ground too.
Nick, I just want to apologize. I don't think Kevin meant to offend you saying you talk funny.
I get that a lot. I had a webinar last week, and one of the comments on the success of the webinar was, I like his accent. I'm not sure that says much about the content, but yeah.
You take the wins, man. Take the wins.
We were at IBS not too long ago, and I love having Nick as a wingman because you can walk around and people want to talk to him just to hear him speak. So when you look like I do, and Nick, we don't use the video, but Nick's a good looking guy. So not only is he good looking, but man, that dude dresses to the nines and has an accent. Come on, you can't not talk to this guy. All right, getting serious though, Nick, you've already been on here before, so you can't use your previous interesting thing about yourself. Yeah, I'm going to get you with it again. You can't use the family, you can't use your work, and you can't use the home building industry whatsoever. We need one interesting factoid about you.
Well, I think relevant to today and to the building space, as a result of this job, I've currently up to 24 different states and 32 different cities, which is within the last 3 years of travel. So potentially that's interesting and tells you that I'm on the road a lot.
So in the States, we're usually like, well, what countries did you go to? In your case, you're like, I've gone to this many states, and you've been all over the place. You've been in Greece and everywhere else. That's awesome.
Getting close to 30, so a few more and I've ticked that off.
There you go.
Well, Nick, you mentioned a little bit about the company, but just give us a little more detail about how you guys go to market and what exactly you offer builders to drive those conversions.
Absolutely. So we see the same challenges consistently across the space, which is, and especially now in the current market conditions, we've seen rising acquisition costs, builders spending a significant amount of money to drive the same traffic as they were 12, 18, 24 months ago. So our proposition is very simple. Buyers are spending longer in their research funnel, research journey, and when they arrive on your website, they're typically more qualified than those previously. So we look to identify high intent signals where people are browsing communities, multiple floor plans, but failing to convert through the existing channels or CTAs, so whether that's a form fill or via the phone. And then our job is to use AI, predictive AI, to understand those movement patterns and to be able to serve the right message to the right person at the right time in their journey. When they engage in that conversation, it's then the role of our trained human team who are looking to qualify them and get them into the hands of the OSCs. So we think of it as an assistive tool to the OSC team and obviously the marketing team, marketing function. Our role really is to qualify those anonymous prospects and get them into hands of the relevant people as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible to retain the value of that lead.
It wasn't that long ago that you didn't actually have to say our human team, like you didn't have to differentiate. Now you have to explain that there's 2 teams.
Yeah, I think things have changed a lot. I think for us, we look at Smart Chat as the best of both worlds. So leveraging AI where we think it's most capable, which is in that deep analysis of data to predict those signals and optimize the deployment strategy, as we call it. And then the human interaction, I always go back to it, but this is often and will be the largest purchase for most of us in our lifetime. We want to retain that authenticity through the interaction. Importantly, we know that by building that trust through human connection, we're inclined to convert more of those engagements into qualified leads. So I think it makes sense in the data. The data shows it. We've conducted a number of different tests, as you can imagine, trying to optimize, and confident with our current kind of proposal.
Well, speaking of data, that was one of the reasons that we wanted to have you back today, is that you guys recently did a study and I saw some of that information. I'm like, wow, this is good stuff. We need to dive in a little bit deeper and share some of that. So my understanding is that you went through Google Analytics data from last year, so 2025. It was like 50 builders, I think, and all the traffic that you guys are able to see from that, and did some analysis and slicing and dicing. What got you guys interested, first of all? Just why'd you even want to do that? What was kind of the driver behind it?
Traditionally, as marketers, we've often approached challenges or challenging conditions with a gut feel. But now more than ever, it's important to use stats and data to be able to articulate what we're seeing and how to optimize our strategy to get the outcome we desired. So we've obviously got a great data set. We've got over 100 builders, 150 builders close to, and we thought we could leverage that to produce some authentic data for the rest of the industry to benchmark how they're currently faring. I think importantly from our perspective, unlike other studies, obviously our clients are agency agnostic, which means that we have a really good variety over digital strategy and overall paid media strategy. So we're not benchmarking stats against other clients within our portfolio that are using the same marketing services.
So looking at it like a 50,000-foot elevation, did you notice any consistent patterns or any kind of shifts that are occurring currently?
The data that we've taken is across markets and across different builder sizes. On average, we've got around 1 million visitors per month across the year we're in question, but we do see some trends when we look at the granularity of some specific data sets. Now, in terms of strategy, you can see that, and we'll share the visuals further down, I'm sure, Greg, but we can dig into some similarities that would be helpful on this data.
Nick, just to remind people that sometimes if we start talking about numbers and you're just listening, it can be a little hard to keep up. So Nick is going to make this data available, and we'll be able to have that link for you to go download and look at some of these numbers in more detail later. So our goal today is just kind of give you a taste of what's in there and some of the insights that the conversion team has been finding, which I think are kind of interesting. So when you think about that, Nick, what was the big wow, we didn't expect, or, oh, this is exactly what we thought was happening, that now we can prove it? Was there some big wow, aha number that jumped out?
Yeah, I'm actually going to take a step back and just give the audience a bit of an overall picture of what we've seen. So, headline stats from this data set, as you said, Greg, over 50 builders across the states. We've seen an average decline in engagement time across paid channels of 24%. We've seen 2 to 4x increase in organic search engagement versus paid search. Interestingly, one of the big headline stats was a 400% increase in average social user growth.
24% decline in time across paid channels sounds like a lot to me. 400% growth in social sounds like an even bigger lot to me. Those are some interesting numbers. So let's pick one and drill in a little bit more. So when you say average decline, sometimes when you group things, everybody's the same, or is there one subset that's seeing a much different impact in that kind of decline across the paid channels?
So what the data shows, and when we look at this 24% decline, is that even when traffic grew, engagement fell. So people arrived faster and left faster. So what we suggest is it's not a traffic problem, it's an intent problem. If we look specifically at the data sets and the traffic sources, Greg, to your point, the big indicator here is paid social. So the average time spent on site from paid social was less than 10 seconds. It was around 7 seconds across those builders that we looked at.
I think that's pretty interesting because I also have seen on my side a growing interest in paid social from builders, which is kind of interesting. You're telling us that, hey, maybe it's not working as well as it used to, but I feel like we see people with some of the reduction in the organic traffic, I think, which is some of that's coming from AI, some of that's Google's just changing the way the results work. So they've been looking to social to say, oh, how do we get in front of our audience? And now you're kind of saying, well, it may not work quite as well. But of course, then to be fair, we don't know exactly how good these campaigns are that people are running, right? So maybe it's an optimization issue as opposed to a channel issue. Any thoughts there, or am I just kind of off on my own thinking out loud, which is always dangerous?
I think you're completely right. So we're seeing different market forces and different channel forces here at play. There is an element from this data that shows that we should be grouping some channels differently in terms of their performance. So I'm going to go back to actually organic social here. We're thinking short-term content, whether it's TikTok or Facebook ads or Instagram, anything Meta. Ultimately, these types of campaigns and these types of activity, perhaps we shouldn't be looking at them from a lead generation perspective, and it should be more from a top of the funnel marketing awareness. And I think if we look at these different activities with different end goals, ultimately we can benchmark success to illustrate that. So I think that the takeaway from the engagement time by channel is that we really should be leaning into those that move the needle most, goes without saying. And ultimately, it doesn't disregard the other channels that we've got at our disposal or in our armory. It's just that we should look to deploy them differently.
So then based on what you saw, what is the channel that's working the best based on the data that you guys saw?
I'm glad you asked. Well, the most effective way to convert your traffic, or the most effective traffic source, is the free traffic source. It's organic traffic coming to your website. So I think that's really profound that we're spending tons of money and effort and resource into driving people to our website through paid channels, and actually the ones that we're seeing are most inclined to convert and progress are those starting the journey from their own comfort and from their own perspective.
All right, now I got to take one little issue with that comment, Nick, all right, because true good organic traffic is actually not free. You got to work really hard at it to get it. There's a lot of work, whether that's an agency or partner or in-house person that's doing stuff. It's not free. It's just different where that cost lives, right? I got to go on record there. I understand what you mean. The click doesn't cost you at that moment the way that the paid search does. So,
And can I add to that, Greg? Because I agree with you in the fact that the attribution is not always direct to what that original touch point was. So if they saw that SEO ad or some kind of paid social ad, they may not activate on that now, but it was a billboard in front of their face that they saw that instigated them to go look up XYZ builders because it's in their area and that's who they want to go to. Is that a fair assessment, Nick?
I think so. And Greg, yeah, I'm being slightly facetious here because, of course, that journey doesn't start with a singular search. Ultimately, we're seeing that when it comes to someone's search for a new home, I think it really compounds that notion that we are aware of, which is that buyers are far more research. So it makes sense that for those that are typing in a builder organically into an engine are actually going to convert better than those arriving directly from a paid channel. So that might mean they've visited 4 or 5 times before, or they've seen paid media and other activities. But actually, if we're just tracking it from a pure kind of UTM link, that's what we're seeing from a conversion and engagement perspective.
I think this is a really powerful discussion to get a little deeper into attribution challenges, right? Because we've always struggled with who gets credit. Is it the last click or the first click or the 25 clicks in between that happen? And as a marketer, if you hear this and go, oh, paid doesn't work anymore, only organic works, I think that might be an overreach in analyzing this data. Would you be comfortable with that, Nick? Or do you feel like you guys went deep enough to say, quit doing paid?
No, I think so. I think we would be out of a job if that were the case. But I think from our point here, and we spoke about it with some of our partners separately, is about how we optimize our traffic and the conversion of that traffic to the channel. So working backwards, if we're looking from an OSC perspective, when leads arrive with our CRM, being able to track the source that they're coming from, and then ultimately being able to triage lead by source to be able to deal with them effectively.
All right, so this raises a question for me to be interested in that's not probably really part of this study, but how do you see from your vision of looking at these builders, are they tracking these types of things consistently? Is everybody tracking, or only some of them actually trying to even capture that kind of data?
I think there's limited tracking here, and the problem is a lot of builders will work with multiple systems for that tracking. So whether they're trying to look directly within their CRM or whether they're looking at Google Analytics, there's no consistency, which means that we're seeing data loss. That's consistent. The consistency is the inconsistency. But the best builders will have a fairly good picture, a life cycle of those leads and those touch points, and the OSE should be treating them accordingly.
So I know that one of the data points that I saw that was kind of interesting is that, and I think it kind of makes sense to me, but there was data in there about mobile versus desktop, and the idea that mobile had more visits, but then desktop had the engagement going along with it. So let's unpack that one a little. What are some of the implications you guys see with that one?
Yeah, I also found this really interesting. So the headline stat was mobile traffic equated to 65% of total visits. But separately, the conversion of the mobile traffic was significantly lower, so around 40% lower than that of desktop. I was looking at this, and this is a common trend. We often speak with builders, and one of their focuses for, it seems in perpetuity, is around mobile optimization. How can we optimize the website to feel better, to look better, that customer experience? And obviously, that's important because we see that the traffic volumes correlate to that. But then we look obviously further down the funnel, we're not seeing the lead conversion staying in trend. And I was thinking about my own personal journey when I'm looking to buy a home, or when I have done in the past. Usually, and this might sound a really significant point, but if I'm looking at a floor plan, or if I'm looking at a listing, for example, if it's not in new home construction, I'm going to want the biggest screen possible. And this might sound a really silly point, but actually, when I'm looking at something, when I'm looking at floor plans, I want to have a visual which is as clear as possible. And the mobile doesn't offer that. The mobile devices don't offer that to the same extent as a desktop or indeed a laptop. That also leads to the buying journey, and also speaks to our point earlier around the attribution of this traffic and ultimately that buyer journey. So I suggest that what we're seeing here is potentially people starting that journey on a mobile device, their initial journey, whether that's clicking through or being redirected through a pay channel. And then when they thought about it and they sat on it and they're starting to have those deeper conversations within their family, and I think of this as a family decision, whether it's a nuclear family or indeed a partnership or whatever it might be, they're going to have a different buying journey. So they're sitting down, taking longer, spending longer on site, and that typically involves a desktop device as opposed to a mobile. And I think that makes sense.
Nicholas, welcome to my world. Thank you for bringing that up, especially about the screen size. I can tell you that back in 2016, we actually did a very deep dive into people finding interactive floor plans across tens of thousands of plans, hundreds of builders across the entire United States. And what we found in 2016 was an 80-80 flip. 80% of the initial engagement came from mobile. This was back in 2016. 80% of the initial touch was on a mobile device. Then 80% of the engagement time, and looking at the amount of time people spend on the interactive floor plan, these are just purely looking at interactive floor plans alone, no other aspects of the website, just the IFP. 80% of the engagement time was on a desktop. Now, 10 years later, we just did this about 6 months ago, so back in 2025, so 9.5 years later, we found that those numbers aren't that far off. It's still about roughly 80+%, and that slightly rose the number of people that find you on a mobile device first. But it's only about 75%, 74%, and I don't have the exact numbers in the front of my head, but it's roughly about 5% less. But about 74% is still being spent on desktop. So you're exactly right. People get the intrigue and the interest and the discovery on the mobile, and then they're doing the deep dive when they get home on their desktop. That rings true. I know for a fact it rings true on IFP, so possibly with all the content on the website as well.
You're completely right. I don't like to make sweeping statements, but if I were to contradict my own rule, I'd suggest that what we're seeing is the mobile viewer is more of a scroller, they're browsing. The desktop visitor is comparing floor plans and running the numbers, frankly. What does this mean in practice? Well, I think it also goes up to the workflow for our OSEs and back end, making sure we're treating leads differently according to the source, but also device, I think makes sense.
Well, now, to be a contrarian in the room, which is not usually my role, that's somebody else's role here, but could it be that our mobile sites just aren't very good? I have no data to back that up, but maybe there's an opportunity to make our mobile sites better because they're not converting the way that the desktop sites are. I agree with the premises you guys are putting out there, by the way, but maybe there's some opportunity for mobile optimization as well.
Well, Greg, look at the data. Clearly, there's an opportunity to optimize because the majority of traffic is viewing our website in that format. So, regardless of whether we're looking at it from a purely conversion perspective, clearly we want to provide them with a good customer experience, and the website should be optimized for that purpose in any case.
Nick, when you talk about conversions too, when we talk about what were you guys using in your study to measure conversions? What counted as a conversion for you in this data?
Again, always tricky because of the lack of consistency within our goals within GA. But typically, we're looking at primary conversions within Google Analytics. So those are things like phone calls, those are ask a question, form fills, and then register interest in specific communities or floor plans. We try to exclude as far as possible secondary conversion. So those would be things like newsletters and some sort of downloads which are less engaged than others.
Can I expand on that and ask you this question? Does that conversion vary based on the sophistication of the use of the CRM by the individual home builders? Because a HubSpot or a Lasso, those are just tools, and you can use it for its full breadth of the services that they offer, and you can use it for a very narrow, simplified scope. So for a builder that basically is taking all his attributions and linking them all and tracking everything and putting action items in position for that, do you find that those builders that are less sophisticated, that are just using for just the basic touch base information, like, oh, I need to call Billy Bob back because he asked about this plan. Do you find that you're getting the same consistent data, or are the builders that are making more links, making more integrations, are they finding more successes with being able to track those attributions of how they're coming in?
The key here is that if we oversimplify our conversion metrics and using simplified goals for conversion, ultimately can be quite misleading. So to your point about calling, Bobby, whoever it is, well, are we confident that those calls are meaningful sales increase, or are they going to be warranty? Are they going to be things outside of that sales process that, marketing, accounting as leads and doing a good job, but fundamentally aren't driving value? So to your point, I think the most successful builders are going to the granular level and they should be using a single source of truth, but that's not consistent.
Well, Nick, I think this kind of information is really interesting. I think we have to be careful that we don't, like you said, overgeneralize and just say, oh, therefore everybody thinks this or everybody's doing that. But did you see any other kind of patterns like related to size of builder or locations or anything like that that jumped out that made things different, or big builders doing better than small builders in some of these things? Or is that not a slice that you were able to look at?
That wasn't a slice that we drilled in too much. So just to give a bit more detail into the data set, this is anonymized data across that pool. We did ask permission for those builders to do that individual benchmark. We didn't segment the conversion by size of builder. What we did do was segment trends in terms of activity or how traffic was moving across builder size. So we have that data, but in terms of the conversion of specific builder sizes, that's not something we've offered. I wanted to drill into one slide here, guys, which I thought was interesting, which is cost per acquisition for 24 versus 25 and some trends that we see across the year. Ultimately, what we've seen across, and again, builder sizes, is that CPA has increased when we compare the two time periods. But we also see significant trends in terms of the months and the quarters. And we'll share this graph afterwards. But we saw that 2025 fairly aligned with the previous year, but a big gap towards Q4. So in October, we see a big spike in cost per acquisition as people were potentially making up the numbers for the following year. And it's interesting to me that that was consistent across the industry. So we are seeing that the feelings of builders within different locations are reflected in their strategy overall.
All right, so Nick, let's cut down to the chase, right? If there's one thing that you think builders should understand about based on this data and this research that you guys did, what's like the one big takeaway?
Well, I'm going to be slightly biased, but I'd suggest that as we're seeing the trends of engagement time reducing, cost per acquisition increasing, and genuinely fighting harder for every click, the biggest key piece in this puzzle is the conversion of that traffic. So how do we optimize our websites to convert more of that traffic, and particularly when we're looking at those sources that are most effective? So the builders that are going to win in 2026, from my perspective, are those that can understand who's coming to the website and that lifecycle journey, but ultimately can capitalize on that intent to convert them into qualified opportunities.
Awesome. That's really insightful. Appreciate that. Any last thoughts or words of advice you want to leave with our audience today?
So I think the takeaway from our side is that the buyers are there. They're on your website right now. They're visiting, they're browsing, they're researching, they're spending real time on your floor plans and communities. The question isn't really whether the demand exists, it's whether you have the visibility to see it and the speed to act on it. So the theme of this data pool that we've pulled together is signals over stats. So that's the shift. The good news for builders is you don't need to rebuild your entire tech stack to make it happen. You just need to be looking at the right numbers to optimize.
Well, Nick, if somebody wants to connect with you and get in touch, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Best way is via LinkedIn. So Nick Chitty on LinkedIn. And then my email address is nick@comversion.com. I'd love to send the report across to anyone of interest.
COMM version.com.
Good clarification, Kevin. Thank you. Well, thank you again, Nick, for sharing this data with us, for putting the work in for your team to pull it out, because I know that's not a 5-minute job. Even with AI, that's not a 5-minute job. So it's great information. And thank you for sharing. And thank you, everybody, for listening today to the Builder Marketing Podcast. I'm Greg Bray with Blue Tangerine.
And I'm Kevin Weitzel with Outhouse. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about how Blue Tangerine and Outhouse can help you generate more qualified homebuyer leads, visit bluetangerine.com and outhouse.net. If you've enjoyed our show today, please tell a friend, leave us a review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Be sure to join us again next time on the Builder Marketing Podcast.